I drove home through the snow, convinced that year would be different. Instead, I watched my sister's children unwrap 36 gifts while my son sat empty-handed. I did not scream or make a scene. I simply took his hand and walked out the door. That silence was not a retreat. It was the opening move of a cold legal war to ensure the people who treated him like a ghost would never have access to him again. My name is Samantha Soto. I am 34 years old, and in my professional life, I am a woman who does not make mistakes based on hope. I work as a risk strategy specialist at Arden Risk Analytics in the city of Northwood. My entire career is built on the ability to look at a set of data, identify the structural weaknesses, and predict exactly where the collapse will happen. I tell billion-dollar companies when to pull their money out and when to brace for impact. I deal in cold, hard probabilities. Yet, as I drove my SUV down the interstate toward the small town of Evergreen Hollow, I was ignoring every single red flag my professional brain should have caught. It was Christmas Eve. The heater in the car was humming, fighting against the temperature outside, which had dropped to 12 degrees. Beside me in the booster seat, my son, Milo, was humming along with a song on the radio. He was 7 years old. He had the kind of soft, trusting eyes that the world usually hardens by the time a boy turns 10. But I had fought tooth and nail to keep that light in him. I gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I kept telling myself the same lie I had told myself for the last 6 months. I told myself that this year would be different. I told myself that time heals old wounds. I told myself that my mother, Elaine Soto, had finally turned a corner. She had called me 3 weeks ago, her voice dripping with a sweetness that I desperately wanted to believe was genuine. She had asked about Milo. She had asked about his grades. She had said she could not wait to see us. That phone call was the data point I had clung to, ignoring the decades of historical data that proved otherwise. We pulled into the driveway of my childhood home just past 4 in the afternoon. The house was perfect. It looked like something out of a magazine spread. Icicles hung perfectly from the gutters, and the wreath on the door was dusted with artificial snow. It projected warmth. It projected family. When we walked inside, the heat hit us first, smelling of cinnamon and expensive pine candles. My mother, Elaine, was in the center of the living room. She looked impeccable, wearing a red cashmere sweater and holding a glass of eggnog. My older sister, Rachel Benson, was already there, lounging on the sectional sofa. Her husband was in the kitchen mixing drinks, and her 3 children, Kaylee, Logan, and Piper, were running loops around the coffee table. The living room was a monument to consumerism. The Christmas tree was so large it scraped the ceiling, and beneath it, the floor was invisible. It was buried under a mountain of metallic gold and red wrapping paper. There must have been dozens upon dozens of boxes, piled in teetering stacks that spilled out toward the fireplace. Milo took my hand. His grip was tight. He was a shy boy, always cautious in new environments, even though this was his grandmother's house. Elaine saw us. She smiled. But it was that practiced smile she used when she was conscious of being watched. She came over and offered me a cheek to kiss, then patted Milo on the head, as if he were a stray dog she was not quite sure she wanted to feed. "You made it," she said. "We were just about to start. The kids are getting restless." "Hi, Mom," I said. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Grandma," Milo whispered. "Go sit down. Sweetie," she said to him, gesturing vaguely toward the corner of the room near the bookshelf. "We are doing presents now." I guided Milo to the spot she indicated. We sat down on the floor. I kept my coat on for a moment, feeling a sudden chill despite the overheating of the room. Milo sat cross-legged, tucking his hands into the sleeves of his sweater. It was a habit he had when he was nervous. He looked at the mountain of gifts, his eyes wide. I saw the calculation in his head. He was 7. He still believed in magic. He saw that pile and he saw abundance. He assumed, because he was a child and because he was good, that the abundance included him. Rachel clapped her hands. "Okay, let's do this. Kaylee, you hand them out." Kaylee, who was 10 and enjoyed the authority, jumped up. She began grabbing boxes. The next hour was a slow-motion car crash that I was paralyzed to stop. "To Logan, from Grandma!" Kaylee shouted. Logan tore open a box. It was a high-end robot kit, the kind that cost $300. He screamed in delight. "To Piper, from Grandma." Piper, who was only 5, ripped open a massive box containing an interactive dollhouse that spoke and had working lights. "To Kaylee, from Grandma." Kaylee opened a designer winter coat. Milo sat up straighter. He pulled his hands out of his sleeves. He smiled, waiting for his name. "To Logan, from Grandma." "To Piper, from Grandma." "To Kaylee, from Grandma." The rhythm established itself quickly. It was a relentless drumbeat of consumption. I watched as Rachel's children tore through paper like piranhas. The pile of discarded wrapping paper grew into a hill in the center of the room. The noise was deafening. Logan was flying a mini drone around the ceiling, the buzz of its propellers cutting through the Christmas carols playing on the stereo. Piper was making her dollhouse scream. Kaylee was modeling a new pair of boots. Milo sat still. Every time Kaylee reached for a new box, Milo's back straightened. His eyes would light up, just a fraction, filled with that innocent, stubborn hope. He would lean forward, and then Kaylee would read the tag. "To Logan." Milo would shrink back against me. His light would dim. He would tuck his hands back into his sleeves. I felt a coldness spreading in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather outside. It was a physical sensation, like swallowing ice water. My risk analyst brain finally woke up and started processing the scene. I began counting. Logan had opened 8 gifts. Piper had opened 9. Kaylee had opened 10. I scanned the remaining pile. I have excellent eyesight. I looked for the silver wrapping paper I had sent money for, or perhaps something different. I looked for a tag with Milo, written in my mother's looping, ostentatious script. I saw nothing. I quietly shifted my position, leaning toward the tree under the guise of moving a piece of trash. I read the tags on the remaining boxes. Rachel, Kaylee, Logan, Piper, Rachel, Elaine. There was not a single box with my son's name on it. I looked at my mother. Elaine was standing by the fireplace, holding her phone up. She was recording a video. She was panning across the room, capturing the chaos, the joy of Rachel's children, the sheer volume of wealth she had bestowed upon them. She was narrating for her Facebook friends. "Look at these spoiled grandbabies," she was saying to the camera, her voice high and performative. "Grandma went a little crazy this year, but they are worth it." She panned past Milo. She did not stop. She did not lower the phone. She just swept past him as if he were a piece of furniture, a stain on the rug that she could crop out later. My son was sitting in a pile of other people's trash. A piece of discarded gold foil was resting on his knee. He picked it up and folded it, over and over again, making a tiny crane. He was trying to be invisible. He was trying not to cry. Then came the finale. "Okay, last one," Elaine announced, clapping her hands. She reached behind the tree and pulled out a rectangular flat box wrapped in shimmering blue paper. It was heavy. It was expensive. "This is the big one," Elaine said. "Who is this for?" Milo looked up. He did not smile this time. He just looked. There was a desperate, terrifying question in his eyes. Is it me? Do I exist? "It is for Kaylee," Elaine shouted. Kaylee shrieked. She tore the paper off. It was the latest tablet, the professional model with the stylus and the massive memory. It was a gift worth at least $800. "Oh my God, Mom," Rachel gasped. "You shouldn't have." "She needs it for her art," Elaine beamed. The room erupted in applause. Rachel hugged Elaine. Kaylee hugged the iPad. Logan crashed his drone into the wall and laughed. In the middle of that noise, a small voice cut through the air like a razor blade. "Mom?" I looked down at Milo. He was not looking at the toys anymore. He was looking at me. His face was pale, and his lower lip was trembling with the effort of holding it together. "Did Grandma forget me?" he asked. He did not ask it with anger. He asked it with confusion. He asked it as if he were trying to solve a puzzle where he was the missing piece. He was giving her an out. He was assuming it was a mistake. I looked up. The room was not that big. They heard him. Rachel paused in the middle of unwrapping a scarf. She leaned toward her husband, rolling her eyes. She did not whisper quietly enough. "Here we go," Rachel hissed. "She is going to make a scene about this. She always has to be the victim." Elaine heard him too. She lowered her phone for a second. She looked at Milo, then at me. There was no horror on her face. There was no sudden realization of a terrible oversight. There was only a dismissal. "Oh, don't look so glum. Milo," Elaine said, her voice breezy and light. "I sent your mom a check for $50 last week. She can buy you something later. Besides, look how happy your cousins are. Isn't it fun to watch them open their things?" She raised her phone again. She hit record. She went back to filming the abundance, framing the shot to exclude the boy with empty hands. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who claimed to love family above all else. I saw the 36 gifts scattered across the floor. I saw the 0 gifts in front of my son. Something inside me snapped, but it was not a loud snap. It was not a scream. It was the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking forever. I looked at Milo. I saw the damage happening in real time. I saw him internalizing the message that he was less than, that he was secondary, that he was not worth remembering. I knew, with the cold precision of a risk analyst who has just seen the market bottom out, that this was not a mistake. This was a targeted strike. This was a power play. I stood up. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I looked at the scene one last time. I memorized it. I archived the cruelty of it. I was not going to ask for an explanation. I was not going to beg for a leftover toy from the closet. I was not going to give Rachel the satisfaction of calling me dramatic. I was done with the risk. I was liquidating the asset. I looked down at my son, who was waiting for me to fix it, or to explain it, or to tell him it was okay. "Stand up, Milo," I said. My voice was soft. It was the calmest I had ever sounded in my life. "Milo, put your coat on," I said. "We are going home." I did not raise my voice. I did not inject a single ounce of venom into my tone. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same neutral cadence I used when advising a board of directors to liquidate a failing asset. Milo looked at me, confused. The wrapping paper was still settling on the floor like radioactive ash. "Now?" he whispered. "Yes, right now." I stood up and reached for his parka. The movement caught Elaine's eye. She was midway through zooming in on Piper's new interactive dollhouse, but she lowered the phone when she saw me zipping up Milo's jacket. "Samantha?" Elaine asked, her voice pitching up into that feigned innocence that used to make my stomach turn. "What are you doing? We haven't even had pie yet." "We are leaving," I said. I picked up my purse. Elaine laughed, a sharp, incredulous bark. She rushed over, closing the distance between us, trying to use her physical presence to intimidate me back into submission. It was a tactic that had worked for 30 years. She put a hand on my arm. Her fingers felt like claws wrapped in cashmere. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, dropping the sweet grandmother act instantly. "You are not dragging that boy out into the snow just because of a little mix-up. You are ruining the mood." I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. I did not pull away. I just stared at her until she felt the awkwardness of the contact and pulled her hand back herself. "It is not a mix-up," I said. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Rachel chimed in from the sofa, not even bothering to look up from the iPad she was setting up for Kaylee. "Stop being such a martyr. Sam, kids forget things in 5 minutes. Just take him to the dollar store tomorrow and buy him a truck. He won't even remember this by next Christmas." I looked at Rachel. Then I looked at Milo. He was standing by the door, his small boots already on, his hands clutching the hem of his coat. He was looking at the floor, trying to make himself as small as possible so he wouldn't be the cause of any more trouble. He would remember this. He would remember this for the rest of his life. You are right, Rachel, I said. He won't remember this, because we won't be here. I took Milo's hand. I opened the front door. The wind howled, instantly biting into the warmth of the hallway. If you walk out that door, Samantha, Elaine called out, her voice rising to a shriek. Don't you expect me to come running after you? You are being selfish. You are punishing your son just to spite me. I did not answer. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut. The heavy wooden thud severed her voice mid-sentence. The silence of the winter evening was instant and absolute. The snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes, covering the world in white. It was beautiful and deadly cold. We walked to the car without speaking. I buckled Milo into his booster seat. I checked the straps twice, lingering for a moment just to be close to him, to shield him with my body from the cold wind. When I got into the driver's seat and started the engine, the dashboard clock read 5:15 in the evening. We had been inside that house for less than 1 hour. I backed out of the driveway. I did not look at the house. I did not look at the window to see if they were watching. I knew they weren't. They were likely already cutting the pie, rewriting the narrative, telling themselves that I was the unstable one, the ungrateful daughter who had stormed out for no reason. We drove for 10 minutes in silence. The wipers rhythmically slapped away the snow. Mom? The voice from the back seat was so quiet I almost missed it. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Milo was looking out the window at the dark trees rushing by. Yes, baby? Did I do something bad? He asked. Is that why Grandma was mad? Because I didn't say thank you for watching them? My heart fractured. It didn't break. It shattered into dust. This was the insidious nature of the dynamic I had raised him in. He assumed the lack of love was a punishment for a crime he hadn't committed. He assumed his emptiness was a result of his own failure. I pulled the car over. We were on the side of a country road, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and snow. I put the car in park and turned around in my seat as much as I could. I reached back and took his hand. His fingers were cold. Milo, look at me. He turned his big, dark eyes toward me. You did absolutely nothing wrong, I said, enunciating every word. You were perfect. You were polite. You were good. Then why? He asked. Why did Santa bring them everything and me nothing? It wasn't Santa, I said fiercely. And it wasn't you. Listen to me, Milo. Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes, big mistakes. Grandma and Aunt Rachel, they were wrong today. They were mean. And when people are mean to you, you do not have to stay and watch. You leave. Do you understand? We left because I will not let anyone treat you like you are invisible. He nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand the complexity of the adult malice he had just witnessed, but he believed me. Okay, he whispered. I love you, I said, more than anything in that house. I love you too, Mom. I turned back around and merged onto the highway. The drive back to Northwood usually took 40 minutes, but with the snow, it took nearly 2 hours. Those 2 hours were a transformative chamber for me. For years, I had made excuses. I had told myself Elaine was just old school. I had told myself Rachel was just stressed. I had convinced myself that if I just bought better gifts, if I just got a better job, if I just lost 10 pounds, if I just smiled more, they would finally see me. I had treated their love like a stock market. I thought if I invested enough, eventually, I would get a dividend. But tonight, the data was undeniable. The market had crashed. There was no return on investment. It was a Ponzi scheme. They took my effort, my presence, and my desire for connection, and they gave nothing back but humiliation. I felt a physical shift in my chest. The heavy, suffocating anxiety that usually plagued me after family gatherings, the worry that I hadn't said the right thing or pleased them enough, was gone. In its place was something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. It was clarity. We arrived at our apartment building in Northwood. It was a modern, secure building, a world away from the cluttered, suffocating atmosphere of my mother's house. We went upstairs in the elevator. Inside our apartment, it was quiet, safe. Are you hungry? I asked. I can make grilled cheese. No, thank you, Milo said. I think I just want to go to bed. It is only 7:30, I said. I know, I'm just tired. He walked to his room. He did not stomp. He did not slam the door. He closed it with a soft click. That sound was worse than any scream. It was the sound of a 7-year-old boy resigning himself to the feeling of being unloved. It was the sound of him retreating into himself because the world outside had proven to be a hostile place. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence. Then, I went to my home office. I did not turn on the overhead light. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, illuminating my face. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, robotic precision. I navigated to my secure files. I opened the folder labeled Estate Plan. I had updated this file 2 years ago. Right after I got my promotion at Arden Risk Analytics, I remembered filling it out. I remembered thinking that I needed to show my mother that I was responsible, that I was a good daughter who looked after her family. I opened the document detailing my life insurance policy. It was a substantial policy, worth $500,000. Primary beneficiary: 1. Elaine Soto, mother, 50%, primary beneficiary. 2. Rachel Benson, sister, 25%, contingent beneficiary. Milo Soto, son, 25%. I stared at the numbers. I had justified this to myself at the time. I had thought, if something happens to me, Mom will need money to take care of Milo. Rachel will need help with her kids. They are family. I had handed them the knife and bared my throat, trusting them not to cut. I scrolled down to the guardianship clause. Appointed guardian for minor child: Elaine Soto. Alternate guardian: Rachel Benson. Bile rose in my throat. If I died tonight on that snowy road, Milo would have been sent back to that house. He would have been raised by the woman who forgot him on Christmas. He would have been the poor relation, living in the shadow of Rachel's children, funded by my own money, which Elaine would undoubtedly funnel into family expenses that somehow only benefited Kaylee, Logan, and Piper. I saw the future clearly. I saw Elaine using my life insurance to buy Rachel a new car while Milo wore hand-me-downs. I saw them telling Milo that his mother was difficult, and that they were saints for taking him in. No, I said aloud. The word was flat and final. I logged into the portal for my life insurance provider. I clicked Edit Beneficiaries. I selected Elaine Soto. I hit the trash can icon. Are you sure you want to remove this beneficiary? Yes. I selected Rachel Benson. I hit the trash can icon. Are you sure you want to remove this beneficiary? Yes. I typed in a new name for the primary beneficiary, the Milo Soto Trust. Percentage: 100%. I moved to the guardianship documents. I had a meeting pending with my lawyer, Marilyn Kent, for an unrelated real estate matter, but I drafted the email to her right then and there. Subject: Urgent update to will and guardianship. Marilyn. Effective immediately. I am removing Elaine Soto and Rachel Benson from all estate planning documents. They are to receive $0. They are to have no decision-making power regarding Milo. I want to appoint my brother, David, who lives in California and actually calls his nephew, as the guardian, with a professional trust management firm handling the finances until Milo turns 25. Draft this up. I will sign it tomorrow morning. Samantha. I hit send. I sat back in my chair. The fan on my laptop whirred. I had just cut them out of nearly $750,000 in potential assets and insurance. I had ensured that if tragedy struck, they would not get a single dime of the wealth I had built. They would not get my son. It wasn't enough to just leave the party. I had to leave the system. I opened my bank's website. I had a joint emergency savings account with my mother, a relic from when I was 22, and she claimed she needed to be on it, just in case I needed help transferring money. There was $12,000 in there. $10,000 of it was mine. I transferred every single cent of my portion into a new, external account that she could not see. I left the account with exactly $200 in it, the amount she had contributed 5 years ago. I watched the balance drop. The digital severance was clean. It was silent. There was no screaming, no crying, no dramatic glass breaking, just clicks. I closed the laptop. I walked down the hall to Milo's room. I pushed the door open quietly. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp outside. Milo was curled up in a tight ball under his duvet, his face pressed into the pillow. He was asleep, but his breathing was hitchy, the way it gets after you have been crying for a long time. I walked over and sat on the edge of his bed. I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. "I got you," I whispered to the sleeping boy. "I promise you, Milo, I got you." The sadness in my chest was beginning to calcify into something else. It was becoming armor. They wanted a war? No, they didn't want a war. They wanted a punching bag. They wanted a silent victim who would come back next week and apologize for being offended. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They thought they were dealing with Samantha, the quiet daughter who just wanted to be liked. They didn't realize that Samantha was gone. In her place was a risk strategy specialist who had identified a critical threat to her client. And when a threat is identified, it is not debated, it is eliminated. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Rachel. "You are being so dramatic. Mom is crying. You ruined Christmas. I hope you are happy." I stared at the screen. I did not type back. I did not block them yet. I needed the data. I needed the evidence. I took a screenshot of the message. I saved it to a new folder on my phone. I named the folder Evidence. I put the phone away and laid down next to my son, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the morning to come so the real work could begin. The morning after Christmas arrived with a gray, oppressive sky that matched the atmosphere inside my phone. I had slept for maybe 3 hours. My body was exhausted, but my mind was operating at a fever pitch, categorizing threats and fortifying defenses. I sat at my kitchen island with a cup of black coffee, watching the steam rise, waiting for the inevitable fallout. It began at 9 in the morning with a phone call from my father, Victor Soto. Victor and Elaine had been divorced for 15 years. He lived 2 towns over and maintained a relationship with us that could best be described as transactional. He usually called when he needed something, and he usually needed money. I stared at his name on the screen. In the past, I would have answered on the first ring, desperate for a connection, desperate to prove I was the successful, reliable daughter. Today, I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. "Hello, Dad," I said. "Sammy!" His voice was booming, overly cheerful, the voice of a salesman about to pitch a lemon. "Merry Christmas, kiddo. I heard you went down to your mom's yesterday. How was it?" He didn't really care. He was just establishing the baseline before the ask. "It was short," I said. "Yeah? Well, look, I am glad I caught you. I am in a bit of a bind here. The transmission on the truck is acting up again. The mechanic says it is going to be about $2,500 to fix it. I am a little short until the pension check clears next month. I was hoping you could float me the cash. Just a loan, of course." There it was. The script never changed. He asked for loans that never got repaid. I had given him over $15,000 in the last 4 years alone. I took a sip of my coffee. The bitterness was grounding. "No," I said. The silence on the other end of the line was thick. It lasted for 5 full seconds. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. I said no. "I am not sending you money, Dad." "But, Sammy, I need the truck for work. It is Christmas. You always help out." "That is the problem," I said calmly. "I always help out. And yesterday, my son sat in a room full of family and received 0 gifts while everyone else opened dozens. I realize that my generosity has been flowing in one direction for a very long time. That stops today. If you need money for the transmission, I suggest you ask Rachel, or maybe ask Elaine. I am closed for business." "You are being unreasonable," he snapped, the cheerfulness evaporating instantly. "You make plenty of money. Don't punish me because you got into a fight with your mother." "I am not punishing you. I am protecting myself. Goodbye, Dad." I pressed the red button. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of breaking a pattern that had held me hostage for decades. That was the first domino. The second one fell 10 minutes later. My phone vibrated, then it vibrated again, then it began to buzz incessantly, sliding across the granite countertop like an angry insect. The family group chat, titled Soto Family Joy, was detonating. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. I did not reply. I simply read, "Rachel, I cannot believe you are doing this. Mom has been crying all morning. You completely ruined Christmas for everyone just because you have to be the center of attention. It is sick. Samantha." "Rachel, we were going to give Milo a gift card today. We just forgot it in the other room. You didn't even give us a chance to explain before you stormed out like a psycho." I screenshotted the messages. Save to folder. Evidence. Then came the voice notes from Elaine. I played the first one. Her voice was wet and choked with sobs. A performance I had heard 1,000 times. "Samantha, I don't know why you hate me so much. I tried so hard to make yesterday beautiful. I cooked for days. And you just leave? You took my grandson away from me? How could you be so cruel? I am an old woman. I just wanted my family together." I played the second one. The sorrow had shifted to anger. "You are poisoning that boy against us. You are telling him lies. You always were jealous of Rachel. Ever since you were little. You need to grow up and bring him back here so he can get his presents. I found a chocolate bar in the cupboard for him. Bring him back." A chocolate bar. She had given Rachel's kids iPads and drones, and she was offering my son a leftover chocolate bar as a peace offering. I felt a surge of nausea, but I forced it down. I did not type a response. I did not record a defense. Engagement was what they wanted. They wanted the fight because the fight meant I was still playing their game. Silence was the only move that terrified them. I saved the voice notes. I backed them up to the cloud. I walked into the living room to check on Milo. He was sitting at the small coffee table, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. He was drawing with a set of markers. The morning sun was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "What are you drawing, bud?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Christmas," he said. I walked around the table and looked down at the paper. My breath hitched in my throat. It was a crude drawing, but the details were devastatingly accurate. On one side of the paper, drawn in bright, aggressive colors, were 3 children. They had huge smiles and were surrounded by squares representing boxes. One figure was holding a black object that looked like the drone. Another held a pink square. On the far other side of the paper, separated by a vast expanse of white space, was a smaller figure. This figure was drawn in gray pencil. It had no smile. It had no boxes. It was just standing there, hands at its sides. "Who is this?" I asked, pointing to the gray boy, even though I knew. "That's me," Milo said matter-of-factly, "and that's them." "Why are you so far away?" "Because I am not part of the real Christmas," he said. "I am just watching." He didn't say it with self-pity. He said it like he was reporting the weather. I reached out and touched his shoulder. "That is not true. Milo, you are the most important part of my Christmas, and we are going to make our own real Christmas. A better one." He looked up at me. "Can I color myself in blue, like the sky?" "You can color yourself any color you want," I said. "You can paint the whole world blue." He picked up the blue marker and began to fiercely color over the gray boy, pressing down hard until the paper almost tore. I went back to my office. I needed to solidify the walls I was building. My computer pinged with an email notification. It was from Marilyn Kent, my attorney. Subject: Confirmation of estate updates. Dear Samantha, I received your urgent directive last night. I have prioritized this request. The changes to your life insurance beneficiaries have been processed and are effective immediately. Elaine Soto and Rachel Benson have been removed. The Milo Soto Trust is now the sole beneficiary. I have also drafted the revocation of power of attorney and the new guardianship appointment naming your brother David. Please review the attached PDF. Once you sign this and have it notarized, Your mother and sister will have no legal claim over your son or your assets, regardless of any biological relation. We can sign these today if you can come by the office at 2 in the afternoon. Best, Marilyn. I exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. It was done. The financial umbilical cord was cut. I replied, I will be there at 2. The phone on my desk buzzed again. The attacks were escalating. Since the guilt trip hadn't worked, and the gaslighting hadn't worked, they were moving to direct insults. Rachel, you have a poisoned tongue. Sam, you always have. Dad says you wouldn't even help him fix his car so he can get to work. You want everyone to suffer just because you are miserable. Elaine, I am going to call Child Protective Services if you don't answer me. You are mentally unstable. You are keeping that boy from his loving family. He is going to hate you for this. When he grows up and realizes you cut his grandmother out of his life, he will never forgive you. He will never forgive you. That sentence hung in the air, toxic and heavy. It was their favorite threat. They always framed compliance as the only way to be loved. I stood up and walked down the hall to Milo's bedroom. I needed to see him. I needed to ground myself in the reality of the boy I was protecting, not the caricature they were painting of him. The door was pushed open. Milo was not drawing anymore. He had curled up on his rug, surrounded by his few toys. He had fallen asleep, likely exhausted from the emotional toll of the last 24 hours. He was clutching a piece of paper in his hand. It wasn't the drawing from earlier. It was a piece of lined notebook paper. I knelt down beside him, moving slowly so I wouldn't wake him. I gently pried the paper from his loose grip. It was his handwriting, practicing his cursive, but the words were not a school assignment. Family is who remembers you. I stared at the sentence. Family is who remembers you. He must have heard me say something similar on the phone, or perhaps it was a thought that had coalesced in his 7-year-old mind while he watched his cousins open gift after gift. He had boiled down the complexity of our entire situation into 5 words. My mother and sister didn't remember him. They saw him. But they didn't remember him. They didn't remember that he loved space. They didn't remember that he was shy. They didn't remember to put his name on a tag. To them, he was background noise. I looked at his sleeping face. He looked peaceful. Finally. The text message from Elaine flashed in my mind. He will never forgive you. I folded the note and put it in my pocket. They were wrong. He wouldn't hate me for cutting them off. He would survive because I did. I wasn't cutting him off from love. I was cutting out the cancer so the healthy tissue could grow. I went back to my desk. I picked up my phone. I did not reply to Rachel. I did not reply to Elaine. Instead, I opened my contacts. I found my brother David's number. He lived in California. He was the black sheep because he had escaped their orbit 10 years ago. I pressed call. Hey, Sam? He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. Everything okay? No, I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. But it is going to be. I need you to be Milo's guardian if anything happens to me. And I need to tell you everything that happened yesterday. Talk to me, he said. I am declaring war. David, I said. And I am going to win. The week following Christmas was not spent in mourning. It was spent in reconstruction. If I was going to sever the ties to the only family Milo had ever known, I had to immediately replace that void with something structurally sound. I had to build a sanctuary so robust that the memory of his empty hands would be buried under layers of new, vibrant concrete. It started with a trip to the hardware store on a Tuesday morning. We are going to change your room, I told Milo as we stood in front of the wall of paint chips. We are going to make it look exactly how you want it. No rules. If you want it bright orange, we do orange. Milo took this responsibility seriously. He stood there for 20 minutes, his small brow furrowed, studying the gradients. He bypassed the safe beiges and the soft grays. He went straight to the darkest section of the display. He pulled out a card. The color was a deep, rich navy, almost black. This one, he said. It looks like the sky when you go way out of the city, like outer space. I looked at the color. Most parents would have hesitated. worried it would make the room look small or gloomy. I saw it differently. I saw a cocoon. Perfect, I said. Let's get 3 gallons. We spent the next 2 days transforming his bedroom. We pushed the furniture into the center of the room and covered it with plastic sheets. I let Milo use the roller. He was 7 years old and messy, getting streaks of dark blue paint on his nose and in his hair. But for the first time since Christmas Eve, I saw the tension leave his shoulders. We painted over the pale yellow walls, a color my mother had once insisted was cheerful, and covered them in Milo's chosen deep space void. When the paint dried, we didn't stop. I had ordered a high-end projector and packets of hundreds of glow-in-the-dark stars, planets, and galaxies. We spent hours on the stepladder, sticking constellations onto the ceiling. We recreated the Big Dipper. We placed Saturn near the window. We built a universe where he was the architect, not the afterthought. When we finished, we turned off the lights. The room vanished, replaced by a glowing, infinite canopy. Milo lay on his bed, staring up. "It's like I am an astronaut," he whispered. "Nobody can bother me up here." "That is right," I said, lying down next to him. "This is your mission control. You are safe here." He turned to me in the dark, his face illuminated by the faint green phosphorescence of a plastic moon. "You are my co-pilot, right, Mom?" "Always," I said. The first external validation that my strategy was working came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after school resumed in January, I received an email from Milo's second-grade teacher, Ms. Avery Marks. Subject: Milo's writing assignment. Dear Ms. Soto, I wanted to share something with you. We asked the class to write a short paragraph today about the person who helps me. I thought you should see what Milo wrote. Attached was a scan of a piece of lined paper. Milo's handwriting was large and slightly uneven, but the pencil pressure was firm. The person who helps me is my mom. She drives the car. She makes the grilled cheese. When everyone else forgets I'm there, she sees me. She took me out of the bad place. She paints the stars with me. She shows up. I sat in my office at Arden Risk Analytics and stared at the words, "She shows up." It was such a low bar. Showing up should be the default setting for a parent. But in the ecosystem of my family, presence was a commodity that had been withheld from him. I scheduled a brief meeting with Ms. Marks that afternoon during pickup. She met me by the playground fence. She was a young woman with kind eyes and an observant nature. "He is doing better," Ms. Marks said, watching Milo run toward the swing set. "He is participating more, but I want to be honest with you. Samantha, he is very guarded. When the other kids talk about their grandparents or their cousins, he goes silent. He trusts you completely. That is obvious from his writing. But his sadness is real. It is a quiet kind of sadness, the kind that worries me more than the loud kind." "I know," I said, tightening my grip on my purse strap. "We are working on it. We had a difficult break from the extended family." "He told me he doesn't have a grandma anymore," Ms. Marks said gently. "He said she got deleted." I nodded. "He is essentially correct." "Well," she said, "for what it is worth, a child only needs one safe harbor to survive a storm. You are doing a good job of being that harbor. Validation is a powerful drug, but evidence is better." And I began to find evidence that my perception of the past wasn't just paranoia. I lived in a townhouse complex where people mostly kept to themselves, but my immediate neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, was a fixture. She was 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and had lived next door to us since I moved to Northwood 5 years ago. She had also known my mother socially from church circles decades ago. One evening, while I was salting the walkway before a freeze, Mrs. Delaney came out to get her mail. "I haven't seen your mother's car lately," she observed, clutching her cardigan tight against the wind. "You won't be seeing it," I said. "We had a falling out." Mrs. Delaney nodded slowly. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. "It is about time, honestly," she said. I stopped salting. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Delaney walked closer, lowering her voice. Samantha, I remember when you were a teenager. I remember the church picnics. Elaine always had Rachel on a pedestal. Rachel did this. Rachel won that. You were always just trailing behind, carrying the bags. I used to tell my husband, that woman treats her youngest like a hired help. It wasn't just Christmas. Honey, it has been your whole life. I'm glad you finally saw it. Hearing it from an impartial third party was like having a weight lifted off my chest. It confirmed that I wasn't oversensitive, as Rachel always claimed. I was observant. But the peace didn't last. The enemy was regrouping. 3 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, a car pulled into my driveway. I was in the kitchen making lunch. I froze when I saw the silver sedan. It was Elaine. My heart hammered against my ribs, a primal, childhood fear response. But then I looked at the dark blue paint on the walls of Milo's room. I looked at the estate plan folder on my desk. I was not a child anymore. Elaine got out of the car. She was carrying 2 large, brightly colored gift bags. They looked hastily purchased, generic department store bags that probably contained whatever toys were on the end cap display. This was the love bombing phase. She was trying to buy her way back in with plastic junk because she realized her control was slipping. She walked up the path and rang the doorbell. Ding dong. I stood in the hallway, 10 feet from the door. I did not move. Mom, Milo called from his room. Is someone here? No, I said, my voice steady. Nobody who is invited. Elaine rang the bell again. Then she knocked. A sharp, authoritative rap. Samantha, I know you are in there. I see your car. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Across the yard, Mrs. Delaney was on her porch, watering a winter fern. She stopped. She watched Elaine pounding on my door. She looked at my window, saw me, and gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. She was witnessing this. Elaine shouted, I brought presents for Milo. Open the door. You can't keep me away from my grandson. I checked the deadbolt. It was engaged. I went back to the kitchen and continued making sandwiches. I did not yell back. I did not give her the satisfaction of a confrontation she could later recount to her friends as Samantha screaming at me. I gave her nothing. After 10 minutes of knocking and performing for the neighborhood, Elaine threw the bags down on the porch in a fit of temper. She stormed back to her car, peeled out of the driveway, and sped off. I waited 5 minutes, then I opened the door, picked up the bags, walked them directly to the large trash bin at the curb, and dropped them in. I did not look inside. I did not let Milo see them. They were not gifts. They were Trojan horses meant to smuggle guilt back into our lives. We needed something to replace the family gatherings, so I signed Milo up for the junior science club at the community center. The first session was on a Thursday. I watched from the back of the room as Milo hesitated at the door. He was clutching his notebook, looking for a corner to hide in. But this wasn't Grandma's living room. This was a room full of kids who liked what he liked. A boy with glasses walked up to him. Do you like volcanoes? The boy asked. Milo looked up. Yes, I know how to make baking soda lava. Cool, the boy said. Come sit at our table. I watched my son sit down. I watched him open his notebook, and then I watched him smile. It wasn't the polite, terrified smile he wore around Rachel and Elaine. It was a real smile. It reached his eyes. He started talking, his hands moving excitedly as he explained something about magma. He didn't need 36 gifts. He needed to be seen, and here, among the beakers and the model solar systems, he was visible. But while Milo was finding his light, the darkness was trying to seep back in through the mail slot. The letters started arriving the week after the porch incident. Elaine had realized I blocked her number and her emails, so she resorted to handwriting. The envelopes were thick, creamy stationery, the kind she used for thank you notes. I sat at my desk and opened the first one with a letter opener, wearing latex gloves. It sounds paranoid, but I wanted to treat everything as forensic evidence. Dearest Samantha, I don't understand what is happening to you. I came by to bring Milo some lovely things, and you wouldn't even open the door. I am so worried about your mental state. You are isolating yourself. We love you so much. Please call me. We can fix this. Love, Mom. Classic manipulation. The concern troll. I opened the second letter, which arrived 2 days later. The tone had shifted. Samantha. I have been speaking to a lawyer friend of mine. You cannot legally keep a grandmother from her grandchild. There are rights. If you continue this behavior, we will be forced to take steps to ensure Milo is in a stable environment. Rachel agrees that you are acting erratically. Don't make us do this. Mom. I laid the letters side by side on my desk. On the left, we love you. On the right, we will take your son. It was a perfect distillation of the abuse cycle. They would offer affection, and if you didn't accept it on their terms, they would threaten to destroy you. I took high-resolution photos of both letters. I scanned them. I uploaded them to the evidence folder. Then I put the originals in a fireproof lockbox. I realized then that this wasn't just a family spat. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was a siege. Elaine wasn't fighting for access to Milo because she loved him. If she loved him, she wouldn't have ignored him for 7 years. She was fighting for access because I had told her no, and in Elaine Soto's world, no was not an answer. It was an act of rebellion that had to be crushed. I looked at the blue glow coming from Milo's room down the hall. I could hear him humming as he arranged his rock collection. Try it, I whispered to the empty office. Just try it. I was not the scared little girl at the picnic anymore. I was the architect of a new universe, and I had fortified the walls. But I knew the storm was coming. The mention of a lawyer friend in her letter wasn't a bluff. It was a forecast. I picked up my phone and called Marilyn Kent. Marilyn, I said when she answered. They are escalating. She is threatening legal action for visitation. Let them come, Marilyn said, her voice dry and confident. We are ready. I have letters, I said, and I have a witness. Good. Keep everything. Don't engage. Just build the file. I hung up. I walked into Milo's room. He looked up from his rocks, holding a piece of quartz. Look, Mom, he said, this one is unbreakable. It sure is, buddy, I said, kissing the top of his head. And so are we. The knock on the door came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon. It was not the tentative knock of a neighbor or the rhythmic rap of a delivery driver. It was 3 hard, flat strikes against the wood. I was working from home, analyzing a volatile market report for a client in Tokyo. When I opened the door, a stranger stood there. He was a man in his 50s, wearing a nondescript windbreaker and holding a thick manila envelope. Samantha Soto? He asked. Yes, I said. You have been served. He thrust the envelope into my hands and turned around, walking back to his sedan without another word. I closed the door and locked it. The envelope was heavy. It bore the official seal of the Bryer County Family Court. My name was typed on the front in bold, black letters. I walked into the kitchen and laid it on the island. My hands were trembling. A physiological betrayal that frustrated me. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my mind, the part of me that analyzed risk for a living, was strangely calm. I had known this was a possibility. I had calculated the probability at 60%. Elaine Soto did not accept defeat. She only accepted escalation. I slit the envelope open. The first document was a formal petition for grandparent visitation. Petitioner, Elaine Soto. Respondent, Samantha Soto. I scanned the legalese. It cited a state statute that allowed grandparents to petition for visitation if the denial of such contact would cause substantial harm to the child's health, safety, or welfare. It was a loophole designed to protect children from spiteful parents, but here it was being weaponized by the abuser. But it was the second document that made the heir leave the room. It was an affidavit in support of petition, signed by Rachel Benson. I read the words my sister had sworn to under penalty of perjury. My sister, Samantha, has a history of erratic behavior and emotional instability. On Christmas Eve, she suffered a manic episode where she forcibly removed her son, Milo, from a loving family gathering without cause, dragging him into dangerous weather conditions. She has since isolated the child, refusing all contact, which is detrimental to his emotional well-being. We fear for his safety in her care. Manic episode. Dangerous weather conditions. Fear for his safety. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. They were not just fighting for visitation. They were building a narrative that I was unfit. They were laying the groundwork to take him. Mom? I spun around. Milo was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. He was holding his favorite dinosaur figure, the one with the chipped tail. He was looking at the papers spread out on the counter, then up at my face. He saw the color I hadn't been able to scrub from my cheeks. He saw the tension in my jaw. "What is that?" he asked. His voice was small, terrified. He knew. Children of trauma are like seismographs. They feel the earthquake before the ground even shakes. "It is just some paperwork, baby," I said, trying to force my voice into neutrality. "Is it from Grandma?" he asked. I could not lie to him. Yes. He took a step back. "Are they coming to get me? Do I have to go back there?" The sheer terror in his eyes, the fear of being returned to the place where he was invisible, broke the last remnant of my hesitation. I walked over to him and knelt down so I was at his eye level. I put my hands on his shoulders. They were solid. I was solid. "Listen to me, Milo," I said. "No one is taking you anywhere. You are staying right here with me. I promise you, I will not let them take you." "But they are mad," he whispered. "Being mad does not give them power," I said. "It just makes them loud, and I know how to handle loud." I sent him to his room to listen to an audiobook on his headphones. I waited until his door clicked shut. Then, I picked up my phone and dialed Marilyn Kent. "They filed?" I said the moment she answered. "I see it," Marilyn said. She was already looking at the docket online. "They are moving fast. They requested an emergency hearing, but the judge denied it. It is set for the standard calendar. We have 2 weeks." "Rachel filed an affidavit," I said, my voice cold. "She claims I am mentally unstable. She says I dragged him into a blizzard." "Standard tactics," Marilyn said, her voice bored, which was exactly what I needed. "They are throwing mud at the wall to see what sticks. They have the burden of proof. Samantha. They have to prove that not seeing Elaine is harming Milo. Considering she ignored him for 7 years, that is going to be a steep hill for them to climb." "What do I do?" "We bury them," Marilyn said. "I want everything. I want a timeline of every interaction for the last 5 years. I want the receipts. I want the texts. I want proof that you are the stable parent and they are the chaos agents. Can you get that to me by tomorrow morning?" "You will have it by midnight," I said. I hung up. I went to my office. I locked the door. This was not a home anymore. It was a war room. I cleared my desk. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder I had named Evidence. I started with the video from Christmas Eve. I had found it on social media before Rachel blocked me. I had downloaded it. I played it on my monitor. There was Elaine, panning the camera. There was the mountain of gifts. There were the squeals of delight from Rachel's children. And there, in the corner, for exactly 3 seconds, was the blur of a small boy sitting with his hands tucked in his sleeves, staring at the floor. I paused the video. I took a screenshot. I circled Milo in red. Exhibit A, exclusion. I opened the file of voice notes. I transcribed them, word for word. Timestamp, December 25th, 9:30 a.m., speaker, Elaine Soto. Content. You are poisoning that boy against us. I found a chocolate bar in the cupboard for him. I highlighted the chocolate bar comment. It was the smoking gun of her negligence. She admitted, in her own voice, that she had nothing prepared for him but a leftover snack, while her other grandchildren received thousands of dollars in electronics. Exhibit B, disparity of affection. I pulled up the scanned letters, the love bombing, the threats, the shift in tone from "Dearest Samantha" to "We will take steps." Exhibit C, coercive control. Then I reached for the most painful piece of evidence. I opened the folder where I had scanned Milo's schoolwork. My mom shows up. Family is who remembers you. I looked at his drawing of the gray boy separated from the colorful family by a vast white void. This wasn't just a drawing, it was a psychological evaluation. It was proof that their love made him feel like a ghost. I typed furiously. I organized the data into a spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, event. Column C, Samantha's action. Invited, purchased gift, attended. Column D, Elaine's action. Ignored, criticized, forgot. The data was damning. Over the last 3 years, I had invited Elaine to 6 birthday parties for Milo. She had attended 0. She had sent a card twice. In contrast, she had attended every single dance recital for Kaylee. She had posted about them on Facebook. I printed the Facebook posts. Then I called Mrs. Delaney. They sued me, I said. I figured they would, the old woman said. I am ready. Samantha, I wrote down everything I saw that day. How she banged on the door. How she looked like a crazy person screaming on the porch while you were inside quietly making lunch. I will sign whatever you need me to sign. Thank you, Mrs. Delaney. You fight her, honey. You fight her for all the years she made you feel small. I worked through the dinner hour. I made Milo a pizza, ate a slice standing up in the kitchen, and went right back to the desk. At 11 o'clock at night, the house was silent. I walked down the hall to check on Milo. I pushed his door open. The room was bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the stars we had painted. The ceiling looked like a galaxy. Milo was asleep. He was clutching the dinosaur. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. He looked safe. He looked like he was floating in his own private universe, far away from subpoenas and affidavits. I stood there for a long time, watching him. Then I went back to my office. The only light was the harsh glare of my desk lamp. I looked at the stack of papers I had compiled. It was 2 inches thick. It was a dossier of neglect. And as I stared at Elaine's signature on the petition, I had a sudden, crystal-clear realization. For years, I had thought Elaine just didn't care. I thought she was indifferent. I was wrong. She didn't want Milo. If she won visitation, she wouldn't know what to do with him. She wouldn't play Legos with him. She wouldn't ask him about space. She would sit him in front of a TV while she drank wine and complained about me. She didn't want a grandson. She wanted a subject. She wanted to win. She wanted to prove to Rachel, to her church friends, and to herself that she was the matriarch who could not be defied. Losing control over me was an injury to her ego that she could not survive. She was willing to drag a 7-year-old boy through the court system, traumatize him, and disrupt his life, just to force me to bend the knee. It was not love, it was power. And that realization killed the last tiny flicker of guilt I had been harboring. I wasn't fighting my mother. I was fighting a predator. I sat down at the keyboard. I began to type my own personal statement to attach to the evidence. To the Honorable Court. My name is Samantha Soto. I am a risk strategy specialist. My job is to identify threats and eliminate them. For 7 years, I allowed a threat to exist in my son's life because I called it family. I ignored the data because I wanted to believe in the myth of the grandmother. The petitioner does not know my son's middle name. She does not know his allergies. She does not know he wants to be an astronaut. She knows only that I have removed her access, and she views my son as property to be reclaimed. I am not unstable. I am a mother who finally woke up. I hit print. The printer whirred, spitting out the pages one by one. I stacked them neatly. I placed them in a binder. I looked at the clock. It was 1 a.m. My hands were steady. My heart was slow and strong. I was ready for court. I was ready to walk into that room and dismantle their lies piece by piece. They had brought a lawsuit to a data fight. They had no idea what I was about to unleash. The conference room at Marilyn Kent's law firm was sterile, smelling of lemon polish and expensive coffee. It was a stark contrast to the chaotic emotional landscape I had been navigating for weeks. The long mahogany table was no longer a piece of furniture. It was a battlefield map. I had arrived at 2 p.m, armed with my binder, Marilyn was already there, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, her silver hair pulled back in a severe no-nonsense bun. "Lay it out," she said. We spent the first hour constructing the timeline. In my line of work, we call this root cause analysis. You cannot fix a structural failure until you identify the stress fractures that happened years ago. Marilyn taped a long roll of butcher paper to the whiteboard. We began to plot the data points. 2018. Milo's 3rd birthday. Elaine does not attend. Reason? Headache. Facebook shows check-in at a winery with Rachel. 2019 Christmas. Milo receives socks. Rachel's children receive gaming consoles. 2020. School play. Elaine promises to come. Does not show. No call. 2023. The Christmas Eve incident. When we stepped back, the visual representation of the neglect was staggering. It wasn't a series of accidents. It was a flat line. "This is good," Marilyn said, tapping the board with a marker. "Judges like patterns. Rachel's affidavit claims this was a sudden, manic episode on your part. This chart proves you have been tolerating a hostile environment for a decade. Your departure wasn't mania. It was the breaking point of a reasonable person." "We need to watch the video," I said. I set up my laptop and connected it to the large monitor on the wall. I had watched the footage a dozen times, but watching it with a lawyer was different. We weren't looking for hurt feelings. We were looking for admissible evidence. I hit play. Elaine's voice filled the room, high-pitched and performative. "Freeze it," Marilyn commanded. I paused the frame at the 1 minute and 14-second mark. "Look at the spacing," Marilyn noted, scribbling on a legal pad. "The 3 other children are clustered around the grandmother. They are physically touching her. Your son is 6 feet away. He is outside the circle of intimacy. In family law, body language screams louder than affidavits. She has physically walled him off." We watched the moment Elaine panned past Milo. "There," Marilyn said. She looks right at him. The camera focuses on him for a split second. She sees he has no gift. She sees he is not engaging, and she keeps panning. That is willful blindness. It disproves her claim that she forgot, or that it was an accident. You don't film a mistake you are ashamed of. You film it because you don't think it matters. Next, we dissected the letters. Marilyn laid the handwritten notes out like autopsy photos. She circled phrases in red ink. "Look at the syntax," Marilyn said. "I am sorry you feel that way. That is a non-apology. It shifts the blame to your emotional reaction rather than her action. And here, we will be forced to take steps. That is the threat. And here, we love you so much. That is the chaser. It is a classic manipulation sandwich. Threat, guilt, love, threat, guilt, love. We will argue this demonstrates a pattern of coercive control. She is not asking for visitation. She is demanding submission." The door to the conference room opened, and Marilyn's paralegal walked in, holding a fresh stack of documents. "The affidavits from your witnesses are finalized," the paralegal said. I picked up the statement from Mrs. Delaney. Reading it made my throat tight. The old woman had a memory like a steel trap. She detailed an afternoon 4 years ago when she saw Elaine shove Milo out of the way to take a picture of Kaylee in the front yard. She recounted conversations where Elaine referred to Milo as Samantha's baggage. "This is gold," Marilyn said, reading over my shoulder. "Independent, third-party verification of long-term bias. It destroys their perfect grandmother narrative." Then there was the letter from Ms. Avery, Milo's teacher. It was clinical but kind. She attached his attendance records, perfect since Christmas. She attached his grades, improved. She noted his social integration into the science club. Milo appears relieved, not traumatized. His anxiety levels have noticeably decreased since the winter break. "There goes their argument that you are damaging him," Marilyn said. "If you were unstable and isolating him, his grades would tank. Instead, he is flourishing. The court cares about the best interest of the child. We can prove his best interest is staying away from them." The intercom on the table buzzed. "Marilyn," the receptionist's voice came through. "Mr. Victor Soto is here. He says he wants to speak to his daughter." I froze. I hadn't invited him. Did you tell him to come? Marilyn asked me. No, I said. He probably guessed I was here. He knows you are the only family law specialist in town. Do you want to see him? I thought about it. My father was a man who had spent his life avoiding conflict by giving Elaine whatever she wanted. He was here to broker a peace deal, which meant he was here to ask me to surrender. Yes, I said. Send him in. Victor walked in 2 minutes later. He looked uncomfortable in his flannel jacket, twisting a baseball cap in his hands. He looked at the whiteboard, then at the monitor, then at me. Sammy, he said, this has gone too far. Your mother is a wreck. She's taking tranquilizers to sleep. You got lawyers involved? Over a bad Christmas? It wasn't a bad Christmas, Dad, I said. It was the last Christmas. She wants to sue you, Victor said, shaking his head. I told her it was crazy, but Rachel is egging her on. Look, just give her a weekend. Let her take Milo for ice cream. Apologize for storming out. We can make this go away. It is costing everyone too much money. I am not apologizing, I said. Sammy, be reasonable, he pleaded. She's your mother. She made a mistake. She didn't mean to leave him out. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned to the computer. Watch this, Dad, I said. I hit play on the video. I watched my father's face as the scene unfolded. He saw the pile of gifts. He heard the screaming. He saw his ex-wife preening for the camera. And then he saw his grandson. He saw Milo sitting in the corner, folding a piece of trash into a bird. He saw the look on Milo's face when the last gift was handed to Kaylee. The video ended. The room was silent. The hum of the hard drive seemed incredibly loud. Victor looked down at his cap. He cleared his throat. He looked at the screen again, then at the floor. He didn't get anything? Victor asked. His voice was rough. Nothing, I said. Not a card, not a candy cane, and when I left, she didn't chase me to give him a gift she forgot. She chased me to tell me I was ruining her video. Victor stood there for a long moment. I saw the battle in his eyes, the habit of defending Elaine fighting against the reality of what he had just seen. 36 gifts, I said. I counted. Victor put his cap back on. He looked tired. He looked old. I didn't know it was like that, he whispered. You never looked, I said. He nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't ask me to apologize again. He walked to the door. I am not going to testify for her, he said, his hand on the knob. I will tell her to drop it. She won't listen, but I won't help her. It was the most support I had ever received from him. It wasn't a hug, and it wasn't a defense, but it was a withdrawal of enemy forces. When the door closed, Marilyn nodded. One less witness for them. Now, let's prep you. For the next 2 hours, Marilyn Kent tore me apart and rebuilt me. She played the role of the opposing counsel. She was brutal. Ms. Soto, isn't it true you are jealous of your sister's success? She snapped. I started. Stop, Marilyn cut in. Don't justify. Don't explain. Don't say, I think or I feel. Facts only. No, I said firmly. Better, Ms. Soto, why did you deprive your mother of her visitation rights? I didn't deprive her, I said. I protected my son. Objection, Marilyn said, stepping out of character. That sounds emotional. Try again. I took a breath. I channeled the risk analyst. I identified a pattern of emotional neglect and terminated the relationship to prevent further psychological injury. Marilyn smiled. It was a shark's smile. That is it. That is the sentence. Say it again. I terminated the relationship to prevent further psychological injury. Ms. Soto, did you give your mother a chance to explain? Her actions over 7 years were the explanation. Good. Don't apologize. Women are conditioned to apologize for taking up space. You are not sorry. You are a mother protecting her cub. If you apologize on that stand, you look guilty. If you state facts, you look stable. We went back and forth until my voice stopped shaking, until my posture straightened, until the reflex to say, "I'm sorry," was burned out of my neural pathways. By 6 in the evening, we were done. The binder was full, the strategy was set. I walked out of the office building into the crisp winter air. The streetlights were just flickering on. Northwood was bustling with people rushing home to dinner, to families, to normal lives. I stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. The air tasted cold and clean. I realized something profound in that moment. For my entire life, every major decision I had made, my college major, my job, my apartment, even the way I wore my hair, had been run through a mental filter. What will Elaine think? Will this make Rachel jealous? Will this keep the peace? I had spent 34 years asking for permission to exist. Today, I had sat in a room for 4 hours and systematically dismantled their power over me. I had built a case not just for custody, but for my own independence. I hadn't asked anyone if it was okay. I hadn't called my dad to check if I was being too mean. I hadn't worried about Elaine's feelings. I had acted solely for myself and for Milo. I got into my car. I checked my phone. There were no missed calls because I had blocked them all. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was freedom. I started the engine. I wasn't driving home to hide anymore. I was driving home to a blue room filled with stars, to a boy who believed I was his hero. And for the first time in my life, I actually felt like one. The trial was coming, but the verdict in my head was already in. I was done being the daughter. I was the mother, and God help anyone who tried to cross me now. The war did not stay contained within the sterile walls of Marilyn Kent's office. Like any infection left untreated for too long, it spilled out, bleeding into the mundane corners of our daily existence. I had prepared myself for the courtroom. I had not prepared myself for the produce aisle of the Whole Foods on a Tuesday evening. It had been 4 days since the legal paperwork was served. The tension in my shoulders had become a permanent physical state, a tightness that no amount of hot showers could loosen. Milo and I were navigating the grocery store with the efficiency of a tactical unit. We stuck to the perimeter. We moved fast. I wanted to get our milk, our eggs, and our vegetables and retreat back to the safety of our fortress. Milo was pushing the small cart. He was focused on navigating the wheels around a display of gala apples. He looked better than he had a week ago. The dark circles under his eyes were fading, replaced by a tentative curiosity about the world. "Can we get the red grapes?" he asked, pointing to a bag. "The green ones are too sour." "Sure," I said, reaching for the bag. "Red grapes it is." I turned to place them in the cart. That was when the air in the aisle seemed to drop 20 degrees. At the other end of the produce section, standing by the organic bananas, was Rachel. She was wearing oversized sunglasses even though we were indoors, and a coat that cost more than my first car. Beside her was Kaylee, her 10-year-old daughter, the girl who had opened an iPad while my son watched. I froze. My risk assessment brain screamed, "Threat? Evade." I put a hand on Milo's shoulder to steer him toward the bakery, hoping to disappear before they saw us. But we were too late. "Milo!" It was Kaylee. She didn't shout it with joy. She shouted it with an accusatory shrillness that echoed off the linoleum floor. Milo stopped. He looked up, his eyes widening. He saw his cousin. For a split second, I saw a flicker of hope in his face, the instinctual love of a child for his family. But it was extinguished the moment Kaylee started walking toward him. She didn't run to hug him. She marched. "Why are you making Grandma sick?" Kaylee demanded. She stopped 3 feet away from him, hands on her hips, mimicking the posture I had seen Elaine use 1,000 times. Milo shrank back, gripping the handle of the cart until his knuckles were white. "What?" "Grandma fainted yesterday," Kaylee announced, her voice rising. "She fell right down on the floor because she was crying so hard about you. Mom says you are being bad. Mom says you are making everyone sad on purpose." The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was a precision strike. They were using a 10-year-old girl as a delivery system for their guilt. They had weaponized a child. I saw Milo's lip tremble. The color drained from his face. He looked at me, terrified that he had actually caused physical harm to his grandmother. I moved. I stepped in front of Milo, placing my body between him and his cousin. I became a physical wall. I looked down at Kaylee. I did not yell, but I projected my voice with a cold, absolute authority. "Kaylee, stop," I said. "You do not talk to him like that, ever." Rachel was on us in a second. She stormed over, the heels of her boots clicking aggressively on the tile. She grabbed Kaylee's shoulder and pulled her back, glaring at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "Don't you dare yell at my daughter," Rachel hissed. "Then teach your daughter not to harass my son," I replied. My voice was level. I was vibrating with adrenaline, but I refused to let it shake my tone. "Keep her away from him." "Oh, look at you," Rachel laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Always the protector, always the martyr. You love this. Don't you, Samantha? You love playing the victim. You love making Mom beg to see you." Heads were turning. Shoppers were pausing with their hands on avocados, watching the scene unfold. "I am not playing anything, Rachel," I said. "I am buying groceries. Please move your cart." "You are pathetic," Rachel spat, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "You think you are so high and mighty with your little lawyer, but everyone knows the truth. You are jealous. You have always been jealous that Mom likes my kids better, and now you are punishing Milo for it. You are the one hurting him, not us." Milo was behind me, pressing his face into the back of my coat. I could feel him shaking. "We are leaving," I said. I grabbed Milo's hand and abandoned the cart. I left the grapes. I left the dinner plans. I walked toward the exit. "Yeah, run away," Rachel screamed after us. "Run away like you always do. Grandma is in the hospital because of you." I did not look back. I pushed through the automatic doors into the parking lot. As we walked to the car, I noticed a teenage boy standing near the cart return. He was holding his phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at the entrance where Rachel was still standing, gesturing wildly and shouting at the air. He looked at me as I passed, then back at Rachel. He didn't say anything, but he kept recording. We got into the car. I locked the doors. Milo was silent for the entire drive home. He didn't ask for the radio. He stared out the window, picking at the cuticle of his thumb until it bled. When we got inside the apartment, I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. Milo walked into the kitchen and sat on a stool. He didn't take off his coat. "Mom?" he asked. "Yes, baby." "Did Grandma really faint?" I took a deep breath. I knelt in front of him and unzipped his coat. "I do not know, Milo, but I know this. If she did, it has absolutely nothing to do with you." He looked down at his boots. "Kaylee said I made her sick. She said I am bad. Look at me." He raised his eyes. They were swimming with tears. "Listen to me closely," I said. "If a grown-up ever makes a child feel like it is the child's job to keep the grown-up happy, that grown-up is wrong. It is not your job to make Grandma happy. It is not your job to keep her from fainting. You are 7 years old. Your only job is to go to school, play with your Legos, and be a kid. Do you understand?" "But I don't want to see her," he whispered, the confession coming out like a sin. "Does that make me bad?" "No," I said fiercely. "It makes you smart. It means you know who treats you well and who doesn't. You are protecting yourself, just like I am protecting you. That is not bad, Milo. That is brave." He leaned forward and hugged me. I held him tight, feeling the smallness of his frame. I wanted to drive back to the store and scream, but I knew that was what they wanted. They wanted the reaction. Later that evening, after Milo had finally fallen asleep, my phone pinged with a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group, the Northwood Buzz. I usually ignored the group. It was mostly complaints about trash pickup or lost cats, but the preview text caught my eye. "Saw this at Whole Foods today. This lady went full psycho on a mom and her kid." I clicked the link. It was the video the teenager had recorded. The angle was from the side, but the audio was crystal clear. It caught the tail end of the interaction. It showed me standing calmly in front of Milo. It showed Rachel getting in my face, screaming that I was jealous and a victim. It showed her shouting, "Grandma is in the hospital because of you," as I walked away without a word. I held my breath and scrolled down to the comments. I expected judgment. I expected people to side with the loud, emotional woman claiming her mother was dying. Comment 1. Wow, that lady in the coat, Rachel, is unhinged. Who screams at a kid like that? Comment 2. I know the mom who walked away. She lives in my building. She is super quiet and nice. That other woman looks like a nightmare. Comment 3. Grandma is in the hospital because of you? That is emotional manipulation 101. Good on that mom for getting her kid out of there. Comment 4. I was there. I saw the whole thing. The little girl came up and told the boy he made his grandma faint. It was awful. The mom, Samantha, was a total bear protecting her cub. Team mom all the way. I scrolled through 50 comments. Not a single person sided with Rachel. The court of public opinion, usually so fickle, had seen through the noise. They saw the aggression. They saw the protection. Rachel had tried to shame me in public, but she had only succeeded in exposing her own toxicity to the entire neighborhood. I took screenshots. Folder. Evidence. Then I checked my email spam folder. There were 3 new emails from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject lines told me everything. Subject: You turned the town against us. From Benson A. Host mail. Com. You think you are so smart having someone film that? You set me up. You are going to pay for this. Samantha, you are ruining our reputation. Subject: Mom is really sick. From R. Benson 88, hostmail.com. She has high blood pressure and you are killing her. If she has a stroke tonight, it is on your head. Subject: Custody. From R. Benson 88, hostmail.com. We are going to tell the judge everything. We are going to tell him about how you used to be depressed in college. We are going to take him. I didn't delete them. I forwarded them directly to Marilyn Kent with a timestamp note. Harassment continues. Threats regarding medical guilt. I closed the laptop. The digital noise was loud, but the house was quiet. I walked to Milo's room. He was awake, sitting up in bed with his sketchbook on his knees. Can't sleep? I asked. No, he said. I am drawing. I sat on the edge of the bed. Can I see? He turned the book around. It was a picture of a house, but it wasn't my mother's house. It was our apartment building. Inside, he had drawn 2 stick figures holding hands, him and me. Next to us, he had drawn Ms. Avery holding a beaker. He had drawn the boy from the science club holding a volcano, and he had drawn Mrs. Delaney holding her watering can. At the top, he had written in big block letters, "The new family." There was no Elaine. There was no Rachel. There were no cousins holding iPads. I only put the nice people in, Milo explained. Is that okay? It is perfect, I said. It is the best drawing I have ever seen. Mom? Yeah? Tomorrow is the day we go to the big room, right? With the judge? Yes, tomorrow morning. Will she be there? Yes, Grandma and Aunt Rachel will be there. Milo looked up at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars were charging up, shining brightly against the dark blue paint. I am scared, he admitted. Come here, I said. I pulled him down so we were both lying on our backs on his rug, staring up at the artificial galaxy we had created. You don't have to be scared, I told him. Do you know why? Why? Because we have a secret weapon. What is it? A laser? No, I said. The truth. They have to make up stories. They have to scream and pretend and act. All we have to do is walk in there and tell the truth. And the truth is it is like gravity. It just is. You can't break it. Milo pointed to the plastic Saturn on the ceiling. Like how planets spin? Exactly. Just like that. We are just going to tell the judge what happened. You don't have to say anything bad about them. You just have to say how you feel." "Okay," Milo whispered. "I can do that." "I know you can. You are the bravest astronaut I know." We lay there for a long time, watching the stars. Outside, the wind was howling, rattling the window panes, carrying the threats of a family that refused to let go. But inside, under the blue sky of his own making, Milo was calm. I reached out and held his hand. His grip was firm. Tomorrow, we would walk into the fire, but tonight, we were unbreakable. The Bryer County Courthouse was a building designed to intimidate. It was all marble floors and echoing hallways, a place where lives were dissected and rearranged by strangers in black robes. I walked in at 8:45 in the morning, holding Milo's hand. I was wearing my armor, a navy blue suit, tailored and sharp, with a white silk blouse. My hair was pulled back. I looked exactly like what I was, a successful professional who managed risk for a living. Beside me, Milo looked small but dignified in a white button-down shirt and stiff new trousers. He wasn't bringing a toy today. He was bringing his truth. We entered courtroom 4B. The air inside was stale, recycled, and heavy with tension. Elaine and Rachel were already seated at the petitioner's table. Elaine had cast herself perfectly for the role of grieving grandmother. She was wearing a soft pastel cardigan and a floral skirt, looking frail and diminished. She held a lace handkerchief in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes before the judge even entered. Rachel sat next to her, dressed in severe black, glaring at me with a hostility that could have melted steel. My lawyer, Marilyn Kent, was already arranging her files. She looked like a predator shark swimming in familiar waters. "Sit here," Marilyn whispered, pulling out a chair for me. "Don't look at them. Look at the judge. Be boring. Be calm." "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Beverly Thorne entered. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on a sharp nose and a reputation for having zero tolerance for nonsense. She sat down, opened the file, and looked over her glasses at the two tables. "We are here for the matter of Soto versus Soto," Judge Thorne said. "Petition for grandparent visitation. Let's proceed." Elaine's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, who smelled of expensive cologne and overconfidence, stood up. He adjusted his tie and gave the judge a winning smile. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil, "this case is a tragedy. A simple family misunderstanding during the holidays has been blown out of proportion by a mother who is holding a grudge. My client, Elaine Soto, is a devoted grandmother who has been cruelly cut off from her beloved grandson over a single oversight regarding a Christmas gift. We are asking the court to restore the bond that has been broken." He made it sound so trivial, a single oversight, as if I had gone to war over a missing stocking stuffer. Marilyn stood up. She didn't smile. "Your Honor, we will present evidence that this was not a misunderstanding. It was the culmination of a decade-long pattern of emotional neglect and psychological abuse. My client is not holding a grudge. She is holding a boundary." The trial began. Elaine was called to the stand first. She walked up slowly, leaning on the railing as if she could barely support the weight of her own sorrow. She took the oath. "Ms. Soto," Sterling asked gently, "tell the court about your relationship with your grandson." Elaine sniffled. She pressed the handkerchief to her nose. "Oh, I love him so much. He is my heart. I have always tried to be there for him. I cook for him. I buy him clothes. It kills me not to see him." "And Christmas Eve?" Sterling prompted. "It was chaotic," Elaine sobbed softly. "There were so many people. I got confused with the boxes. I would never intentionally leave him out. I bought him a lovely sweater, but I must have left it in the closet. When I tried to give it to him, Samantha just snatched him and ran away. She wouldn't let me explain. It was a good performance. If I didn't know her, I might have believed it." Marilyn stood up for cross-examination. She walked to the podium, holding a single sheet of paper. "Ms. Soto," Marilyn said, her voice neutral, "you say you are very close to your grandson. Is that correct? Yes, Elaine said, lifting her chin slightly. We have a special bond. Wonderful, Marilyn said. What is his middle name? Elaine blinked. The rhythm of her sobbing hitched. She looked at Rachel, then back at Marilyn. Excuse me? Your grandson, Marilyn repeated. The boy you love so much. What is his middle name? It is Victor, after my ex-husband, Elaine said confidently. No, Marilyn said. It is James, after his father. A ripple of silence went through the room. I meant James, Elaine stammered. I was just nervous. Of course, Marilyn said. And how old is he, Ms. Soto? He is 6, Elaine said quickly. He just turned 6. He is 7, Marilyn corrected. He turned 7 last October. You didn't send a card, so I understand why you might be confused. Elaine's face flushed a blotchy red. The frail grandmother mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the annoyance underneath. Details, Elaine snapped. I have 4 grandchildren. It is hard to keep track of every birthday. That doesn't mean I don't love him. Let's talk about that love, Marilyn said. Your Honor, I would like to introduce Respondent's Exhibit A, the video footage from Christmas Eve. Sterling objected. Relevance? It goes to the core of the petitioner's claim of a close bond and an accidental oversight, Marilyn argued. Overruled, Judge Thorne said. Play it. Marilyn connected her laptop. A large screen on the side of the wall flickered to life. The audio filled the courtroom, the sound of joyous screaming, tearing paper, and Elaine's high-pitched narration echoed off the wood paneling. Look at these spoiled grandbabies. Grandma went a little crazy this year. I watched the judge. Judge Thorne leaned forward. She watched the screen intently. She saw the mountain of gifts. She saw the drone flying. She saw the iPad being unwrapped. And then, the camera panned. On the massive screen, the image was undeniable. There was Milo. He was sitting in the corner, 6 feet away from the rest of the family. He looked tiny. His hands were tucked into his sleeves. He was staring at the floor with an expression of resignation that was heartbreaking to witness. The contrast was visceral, the noise and wealth on one side, the silence and poverty on the other. The video played for 2 minutes. In those 2 minutes, Elaine's voice narrated the happiness of 3 children while completely ignoring the 4th. When the video ended, the courtroom was dead silent. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Judge Thorne took off her glasses. She looked at Elaine, who was now shifting uncomfortably in the witness chair. Ms. Soto, the judge said, her voice icy. You filmed this? I was just capturing the memories, Elaine stammered. You captured a child sitting alone with nothing while his cousins opened 36 gifts, Marilyn interjected. We counted them, 36-0. Is that your definition of a close bond? I told you I forgot his gift, Elaine cried out, her voice sharpening. It was a mistake. Let's look at the recovery from that mistake, Marilyn said. Your Honor, Exhibit B, the voice note sent the following morning. Marilyn hit play. You are poisoning that boy against us. I found a chocolate bar in the cupboard for him. Bring him back. The judge's eyebrows shot up. A chocolate bar, Marilyn repeated. You gave one grandchild an iPad, and you offered the other a chocolate bar from the cupboard. That is not a mistake. Ms. Soto, that is evaluation. You decided what he was worth. Elaine was trembling now, but not from grief. She was trembling with rage. She gripped the railing of the witness stand. He is a difficult child, Elaine shouted, unable to help herself. He is quiet. He is weird. He sits there and judges us. It is not my fault he doesn't fit in. The gasps in the room were audible. The mask was gone. The grieving grandmother had vanished, replaced by the bully who had tormented my son for years. Thank you, Marilyn said calmly. No further questions. Elaine stormed back to her seat, her face twisted in anger. Rachel patted her arm, shooting daggers at me. Then it was Sterling's turn to attack. He called me to the stand. I walked up, I sat down, I did not fidget. Ms. Soto, Sterling began, pacing in front of me. You claim you are protecting your son, but isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety? That you are projecting your own childhood insecurities onto a harmless family dynamic? No, I said. Your sister has submitted a sworn affidavit stating you are mentally unstable and prone to manic episodes. Isn't that why you dragged a child out into a snowstorm? I looked Sterling in the eye. I removed my child from a toxic environment, I said clearly. That is not mania. That is parenting. But you have been in therapy, haven't you? Sterling asked, thinking he had trapped me. Yes, I said. I have been in therapy for 3 years to learn how to set boundaries with a narcissistic parent. And because of that work, I was able to recognize the abuse on Christmas Eve and stop it. Marilyn stood up. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit C, a sworn statement from Ms. Soto's licensed therapist, Dr. Aris. It confirms she has no history of mania, no history of instability, and is a fully functioning, high-performing executive. It also confirms that her therapy goals have focused entirely on coping with family estrangement. She handed the file to the judge. Judge Thorne flipped through it. She looked at the grades from Milo's school. She looked at the statement from his teacher. She looked at the affidavit from Mrs. Delaney describing Elaine's public screaming match. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, not looking up from the papers. Do you have any actual evidence of Ms. Soto's instability, besides the opinion of the sister? Well, her actions speak for themselves, Sterling stuttered. She cut off the family. Cutting off a family member is a legal right, the judge said dryly. It is not a diagnosis. Sterling sat down, defeated. Finally, the judge looked at the child. Milo, Judge Thorne said gently. Milo stood up. He looked small in the big room, but he didn't look scared. He looked at me, and I nodded. You don't have to take the stand, son, the judge said. I just want to ask you one question from where you are. Is that okay? Yes, ma'am, Milo said. Do you want to visit your grandmother? The room held its breath. Elaine leaned forward, putting on her desperate, loving face again, mouthing the words, I love you. Milo looked at her. He looked at the woman who had ignored him for 7 years. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired of her. No, thank you, Milo said. Why not? The judge asked. Milo's voice was clear as a bell. Because she doesn't know me, he said. She thinks I am 6. She thinks my name is Victor, and she thinks a chocolate bar is the same as a drone. I want to stay with my mom. My mom knows who I am. Elaine let out a gasp. He is brainwashed. She told him to say that. Order! Judge Thorne slammed her gavel. One more outburst, Miss Soto, and I will have you removed. The judge looked at Milo. She smiled. A genuine, warm smile. Thank you, Milo. You can sit down. Judge Thorne closed the file. She didn't need a recess. She didn't need to deliberate. She stacked the papers together and clasped her hands. I have heard enough, she said. I sat perfectly still. My hand found Milo's under the table. He squeezed my fingers. The truth had been spoken. The evidence had been laid bare. The perfect grandmother lay in ruins on the courtroom floor. Dismantled not by my malice, but by her own recorded cruelty. Now, we just waited for the gavel to fall. Judge Thorne did not close the case immediately after Milo's refusal to visit his grandmother. The law, especially family law, is a creature of exhaustive procedure. It demands that every stone be turned over, even if there is nothing underneath but damp earth and worms. Mr. Sterling, desperate to salvage his client's crumbling narrative, stood up. His face was flushed. He looked like a man trying to sell a flooded car. Your Honor, Sterling said, his voice straining for authority. With all due respect, the child's statement, while moving, is clearly the result of parental alienation. He is parroting phrases. She thinks I am 6. That is a specific, coach detail. I request permission to ask the child a few questions to establish his competency and independence. I tensed. I wanted to stand up and shield Milo with my body again, just like I had in the grocery store. But Marilyn placed a firm hand on my wrist. Her grip was tight, anchoring me to the chair. "Let him," Marilyn whispered, barely moving her lips. "He is going to walk right into a trap." Judge Thorne looked at Milo. The boy was still standing, his small hands resting on the edge of the defense table. He did not look like a parrot. He looked like a weary traveler who just wanted to go home. "I will allow a few questions," Judge Thorne ruled. "But Mr. Sterling, if you badger this witness, I will hold you in contempt so fast your head will spin. Do you understand?" "Understood, Your Honor." Sterling walked toward Milo. He didn't get too close, maintaining a respectful distance that felt entirely performative. "Hello, Milo," Sterling said, putting on a fake, gentle smile. "Hello," Milo said. "Milo, did your mommy talk to you about what to say today?" "She said to tell the truth." Milo answered immediately. "She said the truth is like gravity." Sterling chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Gravity? That is a big word for a 7-year-old. Did she tell you that Grandma is bad?" "No," Milo said. "Did she tell you that Grandma hates you?" "No." "Then why did you say you don't want to see her?" Sterling asked, leaning in. "Grandma bought you gifts before. She loves you. Don't you think it is a little mean to punish her for one mistake?" I saw Milo's jaw tighten. It was the same expression he wore when he was trying to figure out a complex Lego set. He wasn't reciting a script. He was processing the question through the filter of his own lived experience. "It wasn't one mistake," Milo said. His voice was quiet, but in the acoustic perfection of the courtroom, it carried to the back row. "Excuse me?" Sterling asked. "It wasn't one mistake," Milo repeated, louder this time. "Last year, she forgot my birthday. She said the mail was slow, but the mail wasn't slow for Kaylee. And the year before that, at the school play, she said she was coming. I saved her a seat. I put my coat on it so nobody would sit there. And she didn't come." Sterling stiffened. He hadn't expected specific examples. "Well, adults get busy, Milo," Sterling said dismissively. "My mom is busy," Milo countered. "She has a big job. She looks at numbers all day. But she came to the play. She sat in the seat." Milo looked past the lawyer, directly at the judge. "I don't want to go to Grandma's house because I'm invisible there," Milo said. "I sit on the rug and I wait for someone to say my name, but they only say my name when they want me to move out of the way. I only want to be with the person who remembers me." The phrase hung in the air. The person who remembers me. It was devastating in its simplicity. It wasn't about abuse in the traditional sense of bruises or shouting. It was about the erasure of a human soul. "He is brainwashed!" The scream shattered the silence. Elaine had stood up at the plaintiff's table. Her face was contorted, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the ugly, jagged rage beneath. She pointed a shaking finger at Milo. "She put those words in his head," Elaine shrieked. "He is a child. He doesn't talk like that. You are twisting him against his own blood." "Sit down, Ms. Soto," the bailiff barked, stepping forward. Judge Thorne didn't bang her gavel. She didn't need to. She simply picked up her pen and made a slow, deliberate note on her legal pad. She looked at Elaine, who was now breathing heavily, her chest heaving, and then she looked at the note she had just written. That note was a nail in the coffin. It documented an outburst that proved exactly what we had argued. Elaine viewed Milo not as a person with feelings, but as a vessel for her own ego, to her. His articulate pain was impossible. It had to be my manipulation. "Ms. Soto," Judge Thorne said, her voice dangerously low, "if you interrupt these proceedings again, you will be removed. Is that clear?" Elaine sank back into her chair. Rachel gripped her mother's arm, her face pale. She knew. She knew the damage was done. But Sterling, fueled by the desperation of a losing hand, tried one last pivot. "Milo," Sterling said, trying to regain control. "Let's be honest. This is about the presents, isn't it? You saw your cousins get the iPad and the drone, and you were jealous. You wanted those toys. Isn't that why you're angry? Because you didn't get the expensive stuff? It was a cruel question. It tried to paint my son as a greedy, materialistic brat. Marilyn stood up to object, but Milo spoke before she could. I have toys, Milo said. I have a rock collection. I have a bike. I don't need an iPad. Come on, Milo, Sterling pressed. Every kid wants an iPad. If Grandma bought you an iPad today, right now, would you go with her? Milo looked at Elaine. He looked at the woman who had thought a chocolate bar was fair compensation for humiliation. No, Milo said. I don't want a present. I just wanted to be on the list. He paused, searching for the words. When you are on the list, Milo said, it means you exist. I just needed to be remembered. Sterling froze. The question had backfired spectacularly. Instead of exposing greed, he had exposed the deep, existential wound of a child who just wanted to belong. No further questions, Sterling whispered. He walked back to his table and sat down, refusing to make eye contact with his client. Marilyn Kent stood up. She walked over to the exhibit table. Your Honor, Marilyn said, to address the accusation of brainwashing and to further demonstrate the child's independent perspective, I would like to read a brief excerpt from Respondent's Exhibit D. This is a school essay Milo wrote 2 weeks ago. It was not written for this court. It was not written for his mother. It was a homework assignment. Judge Thorne nodded. Proceed. Marilyn put on her reading glasses. She held the piece of lined paper with the reverence usually reserved for a treaty. The assignment was titled, The Person Who Helps Me. Marilyn read, The person who helps me is my mom. She drives the car. She makes the grilled cheese. When everyone else forgets I'm there, she sees me. She took me out of the bad place. She paints the stars with me. She shows up. Marilyn lowered the paper. She shows up, Marilyn repeated. That is the metric of love for this child. Not gifts, not money, presence. The petitioner, by her own admission and the evidence shown, did not show up. The respondent did. Marilyn returned to her seat. I sat behind Milo. My hands were clasped in my lap, gripping each other so tightly that my fingernails were digging into my palms. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by a giant fist. I wasn't crying. I refused to give Rachel the satisfaction of seeing me break, but the pressure behind my eyes was immense. I was looking at the back of Milo's head. His hair was combed neatly, the way he liked it. His shoulders, usually so slumped under the weight of his shyness, were square. He had done it. He had faced the dragon. He hadn't used a sword. He had used his voice. Judge Thorne closed the folder in front of her. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10:15 in the morning. I need to review the case file and the exhibits one final time in chambers, Judge Thorne announced. We will take a 15-minute recess. Court is in recess. The gavel banged. All rise, the bailiff called out. Judge Thorne swept out of the room through the door behind the bench. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The formal structure dissolved into a tense, suffocating purgatory. Elaine turned to Rachel. They began whispering furiously. I could hear the hiss of their anger, but not the words. Elaine looked frantic. She was gesturing at Sterling, who was packing his briefcase with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who knows the billable hours are the only victory he is going to get today. I didn't move. I leaned forward and touched Milo's arm. You did good, I whispered. You did so good. Milo. He turned in his chair. His face was pale, the adrenaline fading, leaving him exhausted. Can we go now? He asked. Not yet, I said. We have to wait for the judge to come back and tell us the rules. Did she believe me? Yes, I said. Everyone believed you. I pulled my chair closer to his. I took his hand. His palm was sweaty. I laced my fingers through his. We sat there, creating our own island of silence in the middle of the legal storm. Across the aisle, my family, my biological history, was falling apart. Elaine was dabbing her eyes aggressively. Rachel was typing on her phone. probably unleashing a new tirade on social media or texting Victor to complain. But on our side of the aisle, there was a strange, heavy peace. 15 minutes is a strange amount of time. It is short enough to watch a sitcom, but long enough for an entire life to hang in the balance. I watched the second hand on the wall clock tick. Tick, tick, tick. Each second was a heartbeat. I thought about the Christmas tree. I thought about the 36 gifts. I thought about the blue paint in Milo's room. I thought about the estate plan folder on my laptop. I looked at Marilyn. She was sitting back in her chair, relaxed, scrolling through emails on her phone. She caught my eye and gave me a tiny, confident wink. She knew. She had done the math. The risk analysis was complete. But until the words were spoken, the threat remained. The door behind the bench opened. The bailiff stepped forward. "All rise." The rustle of fabric filled the room as we all stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead. Milo stood up beside me, his head barely clearing the top of the table. Judge Thorne walked to her chair. She sat down. She adjusted her robe. She placed her hands on the file. She looked directly at Elaine. Then she looked at me. "Please be seated," she said. We sat. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a held breath. It was the silence before the avalanche. Judge Thorne picked up a piece of paper. "I have made my ruling," she said. Judge Thorne adjusted her glasses one last time. She looked at Elaine Soto, then at me, and finally, her gaze rested softly on Milo. "The court finds that the petitioner, Elaine Soto, has failed to meet the burden of proof required by the statute," Judge Thorne said. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and final. "There is no evidence that the respondent, Samantha Soto, is unfit. To the contrary, the evidence demonstrates that Ms. Soto has acted protectively and rationally in the face of a documented pattern of exclusion and emotional neglect." I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. Marilyn reached under the table and squeezed my hand. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the child's own testimony was compelling and credible. A child of 7 years old is capable of discerning when he is unwanted. To force visitation in this context would be detrimental to his emotional well-being." Elaine let out a strangled sob, clutching Rachel's hand. "Therefore," Judge Thorne ruled, "the petition for grandparent visitation is denied." She wasn't finished. She looked directly at Mr. Sterling. "I am dismissing this case with prejudice," she said. 2 words, with prejudice. In the legal world, those are the most beautiful words in the English language. They meant it was over. It meant Elaine could not fix her application and try again next month. It meant she could not judge shop. It meant that, legally speaking, the door was not just closed, it was bricked over. "Court is adjourned," Judge Thorne said. She banged the gavel. The sound was sharp and definitive. It sounded like a chain breaking. Elaine stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She did not look at the judge. She looked at me. Her face was a mask of ruined mascara and pure, unfiltered venom. "I hope you are happy," she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "You did this. You destroyed this family. You have taken my grandson away and you have poisoned him against his own blood. You will rot for this. Samantha." Rachel chimed in, leaning over the table, her face twisted. "You are sick. You are going to die alone." I stood up. I buttoned my blazer. I picked up my purse. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me. I looked at the sister I had spent a lifetime trying to impress, and I felt nothing. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I didn't feel the urge to explain that they had destroyed the family the moment they decided my son didn't matter. I simply turned my back on them. I looked down at Milo. He was looking up at me, his eyes wide, waiting for my reaction. He was waiting to see if I would scream back, if I would cry, if I would engage in the chaos. I smiled at him. "So," I said, my voice conversational and light, "do you want pizza or ice cream for lunch?" Milo blinked. The question caught him off guard. He looked over my shoulder at his grandmother, who was still sputtering accusations, and then back at me. He realized, in that moment, that she didn't matter anymore. She was just noise. "Can we have both?" he asked. "Absolutely," I said. "Both sounds perfect." I took his hand. We walked toward the aisle. "Samantha, look at me when I'm talking to you," Elaine screamed. I kept walking. I walked past Mr. Sterling, who was shoving papers into his briefcase. I walked past the bailiff, who gave me a small, respectful nod. I walked through the double doors of the courtroom and didn't look back once. We stepped out of the courthouse into the midday light. It had started to snow again, but it wasn't the heavy, blinding blizzard of Christmas Eve. It was a soft, gentle snow. The flakes were large and fluffy, drifting down like feathers. The cold air hit my face, and it felt like a baptism. "We won?" Milo asked, looking at the snowflakes landing on his dark coat. "We won," I said. "Nobody is ever going to make you go there again. Nobody is ever going to make you feel invisible again." "Good," he said decisively. I was getting hungry. We went to a pizza place 3 blocks from the courthouse. It was a noisy, cheerful place, with red vinyl booths and the smell of yeast and garlic. We ordered a large pepperoni pizza and 2 chocolate milkshakes. Milo was vibrating with energy. The courtroom had been a crucible, and he had come out the other side made of steel. "Did you hear what I told the lawyer?" he asked, taking a massive bite of pizza. I told him about the gravity. "I heard," I said. "You were brilliant." "And I told him about the list," he added, wiping tomato sauce off his chin. "I said I just wanted to be on the list, and then his face got all weird." "That is because you told him the truth," I said, "and sometimes the truth surprises people." He sat up straighter. "I wasn't scared, Mom. I was a little scared at first, but then I looked at you, and I remembered that we are the astronauts, and astronauts are brave. You are the captain of the ship now," I said. While he ate, I took my phone out of my purse. I had 3 missed calls from Victor. I had 6 text messages from Rachel. I had a voicemail from Elaine. I didn't read them. I didn't listen to them. I opened my settings. I selected Elaine Soto. I scrolled to the bottom, block caller. I selected Rachel Benson, block caller. I selected Victor Soto, block caller. I went to my email. I set up a filter. Any email containing the names Soto or Benson was to be immediately routed to the trash, permanently deleted without being read. I was not just blocking phone numbers. I was closing a chapter. I was cauterizing a wound so it could finally heal. I put the phone face down on the table. "Mom?" Milo asked. "Are you going to eat your crust?" "No," I said, sliding it onto his plate. "It is all yours." We drove home in the late afternoon. The sky was turning that deep, bruised purple of winter twilight. When we walked into our apartment, it felt different. The air felt lighter. The shadows in the corners didn't look like threats anymore. "I have an idea," I said. "What?" "I think we need more stars." Milo's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," I said. "Today is a holiday. It is the day Milo was heard, and holidays need lights." We got the stepladder. We got the remaining packets of glow-in-the-dark stars we had saved. We spent the evening covering every remaining inch of his ceiling. We put stars on the blades of the ceiling fan so that when it spun, it would create a galaxy in motion. We put stars on the doorframe. We put stars on the light switch. We ordered ice cream for dinner, a second round of sugar because the rules of the old world didn't apply today. By 8 o'clock, Milo was exhausted. The emotional adrenaline had worn off, leaving him heavy-eyed and soft. He put on his pajamas, the ones with the rockets on them. He brushed his teeth without being asked. He climbed into bed and pulled the duvet up to his chin. "Mom?" he whispered. "Yes, baby? Is it really over forever?" "It is really over," I promised. "The judge wrote it down. It is the law now." He let out a long sigh, a sound that seemed to carry 7 years of tension out of his small body. "Okay," he said. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Captain." I turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, but it wasn't dark. Above us, the ceiling came alive. Hundreds of green and yellow stars glowed softly, a silent, chaotic, beautiful universe that we had built with our own hands. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching him sleep. I thought about revenge. For months, I had thought revenge would look like Elaine crying in court. I thought it would look like Rachel being humiliated in the grocery store. I thought it would feel like a fire burning them down. But as I watched my son sleep peacefully under his artificial sky, I realized I was wrong. Elaine was probably at home right now, screaming at Victor, spinning a new story where she was the martyr, drinking wine and poisoning herself with her own bitterness. Rachel was probably posting vague, aggressive quotes on Facebook, desperate for validation from strangers. They were trapped in their own cycle of misery. They would never change. They would never be happy. That was their punishment. They had to be themselves. And my revenge? My revenge was this silence. My revenge was the fact that my son was sleeping without wondering if he was good enough. My revenge was the pizza sauce on his chin and the ice cream in the freezer. My revenge was the fact that I had broken the cycle. I had taken the axe and severed the root. The rot stopped with me. I looked at the stars one last time. We didn't need their 36 gifts. We didn't need their approval. We didn't need their family. We had us, and for the first time in 34 years, that was more than enough. I closed the door softly, leaving the stars to watch over him, and walked into my own quiet, peaceful life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below. And if you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.